I said to myself, if I ever do this again,
Yeah.
I've seen how many, American, associates that I knew over the years, and I was always looked upon them fondly at like, oh my God, I can't believe, how they've scaled and how they've grown. I said, I want to turn, at that. Right. And so,
Yeah.
that's why I decided to do something in the US. And of course I picked Florida because Canada's very cold. Today's actually brutal. I came home for Christmas, right? So I'm in
Yeah.
Toronto right now, but
Yeah.
and it's brutal here. And I picked Florida for obvious reasons, right? It's got,
Yeah.
as far south as I can go and not
Yeah.
get wet, right? And
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
sort of some of the ways and means behind it.
no, you almost fell off of the United States, but
Yeah.
but you made it there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Is there anything better than a trip getting ready?
Nope.
For a long journey where our podcast released a new epi, searching for a fade fiend, new fixation. Giving this a subscribe is the same sensation. Started with the day ones, they gave us fuel to support the season. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here for a reason. Notification bells, text some friends, all to let you know. Check your Bluetooth, connect, talking with Donato.
welcome in everyone. Season 3, episode 9. What's the big idea? With our guest, Glenn Poulos. Today on Talking with Donato, we're joined by Glenn Poulos, entrepreneur, strategist, and 3-time company builder. Glenn grew his first business from scratch, co-founded Gap Wireless, and helped scale it to over $80 million, and then reinvented himself completely by moving from Toronto to Orlando to lead Prague, USA, a key supplier supporting the modern power grid as AI and data centers drive massive new energy demand. He's also the award-winning author of Never Sit in the Lobby, a human-first sales strategist, and the creator of Side Projects, exploring the future of AI training, all while moonlighting as DJ Fossey and raising 2 French bulldogs who constantly steal the show. This episode is about reinvention, leadership, and the mindset to thrive across changing industries and life stages. We're going to dive in. Glenn, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Donato. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh, so this is exciting. This is going to be a lot of fun for me. Let's start along the lines of your entrepreneurial journey and
Sure.
and reinvention that we mentioned. You've built and exited not one, 2 companies before taking on Prague USA. What did you understand about entrepreneurship the 3rd time around that you didn't know in your 20s or 30s?
Yeah, that's a good question. Great question, actually. So the one key difference on number 3 from number 1 and number 2, number 1 was in 1991. That was a company called Wave, which I exited in 2004. And then in 2007, I started Gap Wireless. Those were both from scratch. So there's no business. I had to incorporate bank accounts, government ID, the whole 9 yards, right? I think the list of startup items was like 186 items long that I needed to get going on Gap Wireless. But the 3rd time in, I realized that there were millions of companies in North America with owners that were, looking to exit in their own way, shape, or form, especially, sort of, we'll call them smallish, big to me, big to me, but small to the world, size companies where owners are trying to get out. Their kids don't want it. They don't have kids. They don't have an exit plan. And they've already done the 186 things. They have insurance. They have a warehouse. They've got, salesmen. They've got, accounting staff. They've got a website. They've got e-commerce. They've got it all set up, right? And you can bring what you learned at your other companies, growing and scaling them, but you don't have to do all that legwork up front. And the biggest thing when you're starting a company from scratch, is finding those first customers, right? And, so in doing it the 3rd time, the one little difference was I bought a business that's celebrating its 20th anniversary, the day I took over, right? And, and the owner is staying around, former owner staying around to help me transition, learn the ropes, because, I'm changing countries. I'm changing customers. I'm changing even technologies, going from telecom to power, just changing just about everything, right? Including my nationality. And, not really, because I'm only on a work visa. I'm not on an immigration, but nonetheless, it's a good joke. And so I bought a business in Florida, and what a leg up, what a head start it gives you, so.
Yeah. What was the moment you realized you needed to change lanes and move into an entirely new industry instead of staying comfortable?
In like moving to the US, changing technologies from telecom to power, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, most people, they stay in one lane. I mean, I mean, this was a significant change.
Yeah.
What was that moment you realized you needed to change lanes?
Well, there's a little bit kind of like two sides to one of the reasons was that, when you sell your business and it's a good exit, there's a very, very strong no compete that comes along with it. Right. And when and like in Canada, you can't enforce a no compete on a salesperson, but on a business owner that sells the company to you, they're ironclad, like shut you down. You cannot, and so I didn't want to get in any kind of a trouble at all. So I thought, hey, I'm going to switch countries. I'm going to switch technologies. I'm switching customers. I'm switching everything. I don't have to look over my shoulder or wait a year. Right. And so that's part of it. Right. But the other thing was that, over my 40 years in sales, since 85 to now 2025 is 40 years, I realized, everything's big in Texas, although I'm in Florida, like everything in Toronto's great and everything, but everything's 10 times bigger in the United States. Right. And, it takes just as long to go to work every day in Orlando as it did in Toronto. Right. But it's just, when Duke Energy moves the needle, it moves far and wide, right? Versus Ontario Hydro or something, and the scale's just bigger. And a lot of times it's not 10 times bigger. It can be even like 50 times bigger. And because there's so many more cities in the United States and there's so many more people in the United States. And so I said to myself, if I ever do this again, I've seen how many, American, associates that I knew over the years, and I was always looked upon them fondly at like, oh my God, I can't believe, how they've scaled and how they've grown. I said, I want to turn at that. Right. And so, that's why I decided to do something in the US. And of course I picked Florida because Canada's very cold. Today's actually brutal. I came home for Christmas, right? So I'm in Toronto right now, but and it's brutal here. And I picked Florida for obvious reasons, right? It's got as far south as I can go and not get wet, right? And so that's sort of some of the ways and means behind it.
No, you almost fell off of the United States, but but you made it there.
Yeah.
So we're talking a little bit about reinvention. Reinvention is a major theme in your story. What's the internal signal you look for that tells you it's time to pivot? Some of us say, "Oh, we're bored." Some of us say, "Oh, I've got this conquered." Do you think that there's something internally that tells you it's time? Do you have goals? All goals achieved? What's that look like for you?
So I sold the company, Canadian company in 2022. So like three years ago. And of course I had to stay private equity, you have the earnout period. And then what sort of happens is you kind of like start to see that you're no longer needed, right? I'm using my careful language and my nice words and everything. And, it was like fun the first few weeks and, and then it was challenging. And then it was like, oh, I think it's time. And, it's very obvious, right? Because it doesn't matter that it's private equity. It could have been anyone, the new owner comes in, they want to change the color of the logo. And you're going, what do you mean? Like I invented the color of that logo and it's perfect. Right. and your ego creeps in to so many aspects of the baby that you grew. And so I had to, like, so I was still working there, but I had to make a change of some sort, retire or what have you. But I wasn't ready to, like, I'm 60, it was 60, I'm 63 now. I was kind of 62 when I left, but that's not really old enough for me in my books to retire. And like, I have 5 kids, and they call dad a lot for help, you know what I mean? And so I got like a long runway of calling dad for money. So I figured maybe I can put in another 10 years, and stack a few more, dollars to prop them up and myself. Right. Honestly, it's, that's really the truth of the matter. Right. Is that I just wasn't ready to retire. And so, I knew I needed to make a change, and I, to this day, I never really applied for any jobs, right? Because I started my businesses, and I thought, I'm just gonna, start another company. And then I thought, why do I need to start a company? I'll just buy a company, right? And and so what I looked for was something that was, different market and different place and what have you, but that did the exact same thing, which is distribute high technology electronic equipment. And so the process of buying the equipment's the same, selling the equipment's the same. Yes, it's a different customer, different technology. You have to learn different buzzwords, but the process of running the business is the same. Like, for instance, I wasn't going from selling electronic hardware to running a SaaS business, you know what I'm saying? Or a service company, HVAC or whatever. I was going hardware distribution to hardware distribution. And so to me, it's like, there's no fish out of water. It was just, and I just went in, had to start learning the technology, learn the vendors, learn the customers, learn the buzzwords, and then just start trying to do what I did before, learn new ways of doing things, bring new kinds of, tools to bear on it. And so, that's kind of how that evolved. But I'm not sure if I totally answered your question.
No. But, on top of that, I'm sure you still have challenges. You've got to stay laser focused. As a rapper from Toronto says, no new friends for you, because being in Florida with all those retirees, your new associates, your neighbors are like, hey man, come on over. We're not doing anything today. And you're like, hey, I'm trying to.
I got to go to work.
So a lot of pressure down there in Florida.
For sure.
You kind of mentioned moving from Toronto to Orlando, to Lee Parker. You said, what surprised you most culturally, personally, or professionally? Since we're talking about associates, neighbors.
That's like, I haven't had any kind of real culture shocks yet. Because I worked in Japan for a while, and that's where I learned the meaning of culture shock. And people would say, I came back and I said, you guys, I never knew what culture shock was, but now I know what culture shock is, right? It's just, those are just 2 words until you've actually lived them, right? And so when I had done some work in Japan, then I came back and I'm like, now I get it, right? The one thing, I guess, is there's just kind of what do we call it? Like the scope, or the scale is the word I'm looking for. Like the scale in the US is formidable. We would always talk in like tens of K for this, or maybe hundreds of K for that. And we'd be really excited. And once every year or two, you might get $1 million deal, that you worked on for 18 months, and it was everybody in the company was involved. And I mean, now, the scale is just so much more grand, and, and it's, and also it's a lot of ways, it's very unforgiving as well. And, I'm not saying it's super forgiving in Canada, but it's just, you really have to have your ducks in a row. And, and there's professionals, at every turn, right? I mean, it's a huge market, and there's a competitor for everything. And, you can't really like sneak in the back door and, grab a piece of business. So the big guys are always there. and they've got all the right tools to get the job done. So you need to bring your game face every day, and so it's very challenging for me in that regard.
Yeah.
And and I just feel this need to like step up, right? It's kind of like CFL, NFL,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're both football.
Yes.
The ball's shaped the same, but it's not the same game.
No, it's not. Although Warren Moon, if I throw that name out there, since you lived in Canada, he made a great transition.
Yeah, definitely.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
Many people fear starting over. I'm not saying you're fearless, but most of us do fear transition. What did you learn about yourself during this transition that only a major life change could reveal?
Well, like I kind of fear not starting over in a way. Okay. And so in the sense that it's like maybe counterintuitive or what have you, but I just have this sort of like burning desire for continued momentum and just to keep things rolling. Right. And, kind of a rolling stone gathers no moss kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that, and a lot of it came from, part of the story that, that sometimes I get a chance to tell it or whatever. But the first exit was when I exited my company MM Wave, in the early 2000s was both glorious and inglorious, right? It was the most famous, infamous exit in the sense that I sold the business. I had two partners. I sold the business, and we all made close to 8 figures each, right? And but we were bought by a public company, and we got virtually like 98% of the money in shares in this public company. And this public company was a household name in Canada. Like if you use cell phones and stuff, you heard of the company. They were in the malls and whatever. So we didn't give them much thought. We just thought, oh my God, they're buying our company and we're laughing, and we're multi-millionaires, right? On paper. Yeah. And we were also became insiders because of the number of shares. So we couldn't sell the shares for quite an extended period of time. And to make a long story short, what ended up happening was the company that bought our company went bankrupt. And so I never got the money. I never got to sell the shares in the public company that owned my company. And what that, in plain English, what that means is I gave them my company.
Yeah.
And so I went from being this multi-millionaire on paper to broke. Right. And so now that will wake you up at night,
Yes.
And so I literally, when the sort of the hammer came down and I realized what happened, I took some money out of my, in Canada, they call it RSP, a registered, your 401k. I took money out of my 401k RSP thing in Canada. And I immediately, within a week, I was working on starting Gap Wireless because I needed a job. I had kids, had a wife, what have you, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I didn't have time, and I didn't really have the wherewithal or even the thought process to go and find a job. I'm just like, no, I just need to start another company because this one's gone.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, didn't you need time to cry in your milk or whatever, And I said, no, I had to pay the bills, right? I had to get started again. And so that's kind of where I learned that I had to keep going. Right. And so I didn't, and I never really took the time. I never booked a vacation so I could feel bad about what happened. And most people are like, oh my God, I'd be so upset, and of course I felt mostly stupid that I didn't do better due diligence and find out about some of these bad investments this company had made. But, I was just, I guess, hoodwinked in some ways. And I never would have thought. It's like, this huge company comes along and buy your company. The last thing you think of is they're going to go under. Right.
Yes.
And so when time came for me to leave after selling Gap Wireless and my time there was up, I just wanted to keep going. So I just kept going. And that's why I just keep reinventing myself, because I just don't want to stop, and I'm afraid what will happen if I do, and
that That sounds like a big mistake. You've owned it. I still feel like I want to ask this. What is a big mistake from one of your earlier businesses that ended up becoming one of your best assets later on?
So probably the one that just immediately jumps to my mind was we had this kind of golden rule that somebody taught me, and I just always remembered it, and I always tried to follow it, which was never make any decision that can end the company, right? Like, don't, for instance, don't invest in this because if this went bad and then you lost your company, then you were screwed, right? It's fine if you lose part of your company or half your company or something, but not all of your company, right? And so never make a decision that could, end your company. And so when we were building the Gap, the wireless company, in the cellular was exploding in Canada from 2007, and 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G,
Yes.
Obviously we know what's happened with the cell phones, right? And by the way, my first company was involved in building the wireless network as well. And I approached my former bosses at my first job to partner with me, and they said, "Oh, that'll never work," right? And I'm like, "Yeah, the cell phone will never go anywhere. Like, who needs one of them, right?" And,
Yeah.
So sorry, I love adding that part in, but nonetheless, I was trying to adhere to that rule, but we kind of made the decision that not only were we going to sell hardware into this business, we were going to also start a division to install the products. So, you see those guys with the trucks and they climb the towers and they're putting up the antennas and the radios, and that was a mistake for a multitude of reasons. We were competing against some of our customers. That's a bad idea. Never, you don't want to cut the grass of your customers. But the worst thing was that we kind of left the manager of that division to his own devices. And because we were like a fish out of the water, we were selling bags of hardware, making tons of money, and he was blowing tons of money, and he was making a collection of decisions that were mounting up to being one decision that could bankrupt the company. And I woke up in just enough time to realize, that he'd blown through $1 million or more, $1.3 million, and we were in super trouble. Right? We were in deep, deep trouble, and we had to pivot. And so essentially the way the story goes, in 2019, we went from 80 people to 29 people in one day. And we transitioned, we closed two little, but in a way, no one really lost their jobs because 40 of them were part of the service division, and we sold it to one of our customers that was kind of mad that we were competing against them. And when I say sold, I mean we sold it, right? Like he got a good price, if we didn't give it to him, but I mean, we didn't really make any money off it. But and he gladly took it and took all 40 people, and he figured out what to do with it, and they were gone snap. And 80% of the rest of the people were in our drone division, where we were selling drones to do inspections of towers, and we thought that was going to change the world for cellular. And again, that was kind of a pipe dream, and we sold that to a drone sales company, and a few other people got jobs somewhere else, and so it worked out okay. But we went from like 80 people to 29 people overnight, and so the difference was that we immediately started righting the ship and paying down the mistake that had been made, and we were making good money in the hardware division. So we were sort of putting it behind us, and because we weren't making it worse, right? So we were just catching up from negative 1.3, moving our way negative 1.1, negative 900K, negative 7, et cetera, right? Yeah. And we went from that to our most profitable for the next 3 years, 20, 21, 22. And when you sell your business, it's your last 3 years, right? We sold the business in 2022, and they do it based on your last 3 years EBITDA, times the multiple for your industry and your size and your, and what have you. And so 2019 was just far enough away that it wasn't reflected in the price of the business, meaning it didn't average it down, right? We didn't
Yeah.
have $1 million loss pulling down our average value. And so that mistake, like you said, how did it go? You asked me, how did it go to become something good later? You know, that was the question you had, right? So
Yeah.
making those hard choices, making, and when I approached my partner, I said, hey, we're going to go from 80 people to 29. And he's like, well, how are we going to do that? And when are we going to do it? And I said, this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to do it by 10 a.m. And he's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Right. And we started making phone calls and doing deals, and we had agreements in principle right away. And he says, I never would have the guts to do that. And so it made all the difference.
Sheesh. After building teams in multiple companies and at this point countries, how's your leadership style changed over the years?
Well, I learned about leadership style. Yeah. So I'm always learning. And I mean, I'm no like magical, like savant at any of this, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of like, good luck is when opportunity meets preparation, you know, and I'm always telling people, like, it doesn't matter, like, like most days when I get up, like, I'm half excited to go to work, but I'm also half dreading it every day as well. But I always show up every day, right? And then, you look back a week later and you can't believe what you accomplished in that week, right? And it was really like, 100 things that occurred over 5 days of working or whatever. And I mean, it's those little things that you do every day that make such a huge difference, right? And so I find that just showing up and trying to do the next right thing is really one of the best things you can ever do. But when it comes to like the leadership style, I learned after we made the change in 2019, we put in a system called EOS, which many people are familiar with. EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a globally recognized program. It's a patented system, right? And that you have a counselor that helps you to run the program, and they go in and they analyze your structure of the processes of your business, and they help you to figure out what your business does, and then put the right people in place, right? And so that's where I learned about process first, people second, and right person in the right seat. And before it was like the next person in the next seat kind of thing. It was like, okay, well, we've got 6 guys in sales. The sales manager left. Bob's the oldest. He's the new sales manager, right? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Versus the guy where, the sales manager leaves. It's like, okay, stop. Now, hey, guess what? We need a sales manager. Yep. Yeah. Okay. What skills does the sales manager need? Blah, 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 right? Okay. Is there anybody in the company that has those skills? No. Okay. Guess what we're doing? We're recruiting a new sales manager, right?
Yeah.
And so the right person goes into the seat. So first, structure first, people second, right? Like I need a sales manager, I need a finance manager, and I need an ops manager, and I don't have any of them. I got to recruit each one, and then set up the metrics and the weekly, the deliverables and the metrics to monitor weekly, to figure out if you're on track or off track, right? And each department has its own metrics, and this system is like, it's really just changed everything for me, and I'm constantly going back to it. And now in my new company, I'm not like, I didn't hire one of the EOS consultants, but I'm going through the same process because it's a much smaller business, defining all of my processes, figuring out which people I need, like which seats I need to fill, and do I have the people to fill them, right? And so that's the core of how I run the leadership. And and I try to be, I like to be the kind of the general manager, right? I like an expert in sales, an expert in finance, because I'm really not an expert at any of them, but I have a lot to say in each one of the, in regards to each one of those subjects, So.
Yeah. What's something you believe great leaders do daily that most leaders overlook?
That's a good one. Well, I probably should have saved my last answer for now, right? I mean, because like the good leaders do show up every day, and the, they're, yeah, like, it's not the kind of thing where you're running it from the beach, right? Or you're dialing it in from afar, right? And and so I always try to put myself as the example, and that hold myself to the highest possible standard, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have two sets of rules, one for me. And, if everyone starts at 9, then I come in at 9,
Yes.
I'll come in at 9:45 and leave at 3. Right.
Yeah.
But I also don't create an environment where I feel like I need to come in at 7 when everyone comes in at 8:30 or whatever. Right. Like, I mean, and so I sort of set the pace and what have you. And I mean, I put in a proper day's work, but I mean, I don't want people feeling they need to stay till 6 or come in at 7 because that's when the boss showed up. Right. That's not a good environment. Right. And
No, it's not.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably my best answer you can come up with.
No.
My head for that.
Kind of triggered me. I accepted a job once and, was done for the day. And it was kind of like, go hang out in your office. And I was like, that's what we do here? I'm all the way on the other side of Houston. Yeah. So it's an hour and a half just to get back to work, to sit there for an hour and a half. And then now I'm going to be in traffic to go an hour and a half back. Wow, it was tough. It was tough for me. So you just took me there.
Yeah.
How do you build trust quickly when you enter a new industry or work with teams who have been doing things a certain way for decades? Like so you bought a business that you said celebrated 20 years. How do you build trust quickly and when you enter that new industry for those work teams?
Yeah. Well, some of the things I would say is that, I'm dealing with, and a lot of times, you're dealing with people that have been around for 20 years. So of course they've done it all, seen it all, and what have you. Right. So I'm always trying to meet them face to face. I'm always doing it either, in person or on Zoom with the cameras on and what have you, looking them in the eye. Right. First thing I want to be doing is practicing the golden rule, that God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so I do the math and I should be listening twice as much as I'm talking. Yes. So I try to listen, without cutting people off and showing real genuine interest in learning what they have to say and what I can learn from them, rather than thinking I know better. Like, oh, in the telecom industry, we did this, blah, blah, blah. Right. A lot, as well as things like, saying something, keeping my word. If I say I'm going to follow up, I follow up immediately. I follow up fast. I feel speed shows respect. If there's truth to tell, I like to tell it right, like plain and simply, and get to the point. People can handle facts, but they don't like surprises. And so, I'm always trying to share a bit of myself, and say, and try to make things relatable and practice, what I call the 3 pillars of kindness, which is sympathy, empathy, and compassion, and trying to display the differences between them and when to apply them. And, a lot of times you have to, understand what someone's going through. That sympathy, sometimes you have to put yourself in people's shoes, which is empathy, right? Like literally stopping. Right. And then compassion is the desire and the willingness and the action of alleviating someone's problem, right? Pain. And, sometimes you need to know when to apply each one of those. Right. And I call those the 3 pillars of kindness. And, and so, and I find that just by just being accountable and reliable and, what's the word, like accessible, people start, eventually you just start to win them over in little spits and starts and whatever. And eventually they just trust you. Right. And,
What's the hardest conversation you've ever had to have as a leader, and what did you learn from it?
The Well, probably the hardest conversation was when I had to tell everyone at my first company that the company we sold it to was bankrupt,
Oh
and that
yeah.
100 people were losing their jobs.
Yes. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
very hard. Um, and what did I mean, I'm trying to laugh so I don't cry, right? I mean, like,
Nope.
what did I learn from it? I learned that I was kind of an idiot, and that but I did everything I could to help everyone. But I mean, it was a little like the Titanic at that point, right? I mean,
Yes.
the ship was going down. It wasn't like we were saving some and not others or anything like that. It was a full, man the lifeboats, et cetera, right? I'm sorry, I forgot what the exact question was, though. I kind of got a little off.
What was the hardest conversation you had to have as a leader, and
Oh,
what
right.
did you learn
Yeah.
from it?
Yeah. And, the other one that comes to mind too, though, is also the 2019, right? Where I had to explain to everybody about that we were divesting of these divisions and whatever. But what I really learned from it was that was where one of the key kind of things of leadership, and I've never really learned how to articulate it the best, but I realized, like, that leaders, one of their jobs is to make decisions, right? Like,
Yeah.
Most people actually don't want to be a leader, because the leader has to make the tough decisions and announce the tough decisions and stand behind the tough decisions, right?
Yes.
And most people, like, they sometimes this doesn't sound like appealing, but most people want to follow, right? And so if you lead, meaning you make proper decisions, you explain to them why, and you give them a path on where you're going or whatever, they kind of will fall in line behind you, and they will trust in you, and they will come with you and follow you, right? And I realized how important that was. It wasn't so important about that we let that division lose money, or that we had to sell that division or get rid of that or this, and that was a failure or whatever. It was, well, what are we going to do next, right? These are the decisions we're taking. This is the path we're following. You guys, you got jobs over here. Have a nice career. Hopefully it works out, but at least you're not on the unemployment lines. And you 29, you're behind me. Let's get going, right? And we ended up becoming, insanely profitable, and we had a really good exit. And this time we sold for cash, right? Of course. So
Yes.
That's the punchline. And yeah. And so those are some of the things I learned. And yeah.
When you think about the people who influenced your leadership, who stands out and why?
Well, that's a good thing. So there's so many, like, aspects of it. Like, in sales, there were a lot of mentors along the way. And and what in the 80s, when I went into sales, I started to realize the ones that really knew where I could mentor from, where they were mentoring me, and I started writing down what they were saying. And then I started creating stories around it so I would never forget it. And that's how I wrote the book, Never Sit in the Lobby. It's the stories I learned from those kind of those mentors, right? And some of them were not just the sales managers. Some of them were other business people and acquaintances and what have you. And so, I kind of like tried to pick the best of I could from everyone. And, and I either named the rules after them, or, shares the stories about them and how they impacted. And that's really how I came about writing the book, and sharing my 57 tips on how to build a career in sales and business. Right. And, my first boss was in the government. I got kicked out of the Canadian government for working too hard. That's how I ended up in sales. And the guy was ex-military, and he was really bright, and he was just so smart. And he came to me, and he said, Glenn, he says, money doesn't flow out of a toolbox. It flows out of the end of a pen, or it flows better out of the end of a pen, meaning, and I was making good money with my toolbox, an electronic technician or whatever, but owning the company that, and signing the checks and whatever is what he was saying, you make more money in that respect. Right. And he was the one that said, you really need to look at what you're good at. And and he said, you would be much better suited in sales. Right. And And he was the one that set me off on my path in 1985, which sort of led me to today, right? 40 years later. And so I often look fondly back upon him. So
let's talk a little bit about the book.
Sure.
Sales strategy and human first selling. You never sit in the lobby. It's influenced sellers across North America. What principle from the book you wish more salespeople took seriously?
So, it's really the sub. There's there's the title, Never Sit in the Lobby, and then there's like 57 tips for, and then there's the subtitle that's not written, which is really like the why of the book, and it's how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers, and to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And that's the culmination of all 57, is how to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? Like even in the face of losing deals, not getting the order, getting the order, my sales environment, I grew up in a world where you had a territory, right? Meaning like, now I'm selling to Duke Energy every day of the week, not just once, right? Like I need Duke Energy to want me to come back tomorrow, right? And so even if they tell me, hey, sorry, Glenn, your price is too high, we went with the other guy, right? Or your technology sucks, we're not buying yours, we're buying this one. But on the next one, you win it, and you want to be, magnanimous in this one, and you want to be don't want to be a sore loser on that one, right? And and so the one of the things I learned is like, don't be a pain in the ass to people, right? Like that's your the number one thing, and the number one silent message that I try to get across with everything that I do. But at the end of it, I'm trying to help people to get in front of them, stay in front of them, act in front of them, so that people will invite you back, right? And
it sounds like that's the answer to my next question, because it's like I'm throwing the alley-oop and you're dunking it. Because I was going to ask you what human sales skills will never go out of style. And it sounds like you just
rapport, right? And that, and the thing about that I try to get across, right, is I try to explain through a couple of stories and what have you about negative rapport. Like, I have a chapter called Implied Familiarity Also Breeds Contempt, right? Which means, the worst kind of salesperson, like not the worst, but one of the characteristics that really is annoying is when a salesman is like hyper familiar to you, right? Meaning like they're looking at something with you and making an assumption about you. Yes. And you're like, well, how do you know? Like for instance, like, oh, we should go golfing, right? Like, I mean, well, what in me says I want to go golfing, right? And
because you live in Florida,
right? Right, exactly, right. Guess what? I don't golf, and I mean, like to me, 18 holes, like in the burning hot heat of whatever. Like, I love being on the hot, but I mean, I don't want to stand on the heat, for 18 holes, right? I just don't enjoy it. It's not my sport, right? And so. The rapport is probably the one. And also that, so many people nowadays, it's kind of an argument that I have with them, right? Where it's like, they want to do it, they want to sell virtually, right? And I mean, some products are sold virtually. And I mean, I'm not really the best guy for the one to teach you how to sell everything virtually. Like, I mean, that's not the world I'm talking about. But I'm also want to coach you that don't confuse products that are sold virtually with where you just don't want to make a sales call, right? And think you can do it virtually, and because you're lazy, right? And so there's a big difference, right? And so, and I always explain to people about, they're like, oh, everything could be sold virtually over Zoom, and we do it all the time, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Well, so let's just say you sell your company for, $500 million, and your wife decides you need a private jet, so you're going to buy a $50 million private jet. So, okay, I'm going to, invite you on a nice Zoom call, and I'm going to pick you up virtually, right, and drive you to the airport over Zoom. I'm going to get on the plane. You're not. You're going to be in your office, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to sip champagne and, eat caviar with the flight attendants, meet the pilot, fly to Miami for lunch and fly back home. Right. Then you're going to hang up and you're going to give me $50 million and never have taken a test flight. Is that the way, and I do that sort of just to be a little annoying, but also to say, like, whether it's 50 million or 5 million or there are a lot of things that people want to see it, feel it, touch it, and see how it's going to make them feel. Right. And you got to get in front of your customers in order to do that. Sometimes it can be over Teams, but the guy who's making the big bucks, the big commission checks, he's there at the customer figuring out what's behind the lobby, right? What products are they using now? Who's the competitor? Who's the incumbent? How much money they have? Who's the decision makers? And you're not going to find that out over Zoom. And, and so those are some of the important things that I want to try to get across and give people little tips and tricks on how to do it today, because it's challenging. And
so then, since we're talking challenging, let me challenge you, Glenn.
Okay.
When you're coaching a struggling salesperson, what's the first question you're going to ask to get to the real issue?
Well, I'm always going to, most of the time the issue is that they're not making enough sales calls. And so
right?
Honestly, and so I asked them how they break up their week. Right. And, like, how do you divide up your week? What does a typical week work like? Because I want them to sort of describe, because in the fullness of that answer, the truth kind of comes out, right? Because they basically try. And a lot of times, you wouldn't be surprised how many times people say to me, like, well, Mondays, I'm usually like in the office, I'm planning out the week and, this and that. And, and then at midweek, I'm, usually on the road and, and I try to figure out how many calls are making. And then Friday, I'm usually following up and I'm like, wait a minute. So you're in the office on Friday following up or, and you're also in the office on Monday. I said, so you basically have a 4-day weekend. And no. And I'm like, and so, basically I try to figure out what they're doing and what the resistance part is, right? Because sometimes I find like there's guys they don't mind picking up the phone, but when they get on the phone, like they suck at it. And, they're just not fun. They're just not interesting to talk to. And they actually need some kind of vocal coaching or something. Like they need like role playing, because they sound like wimpy or annoying or, and these are problems that can be solved. Right. And sometimes there's people that'll, they're scared to go and see the customer. Right. So they'll talk to them on the phone and they're not bad, and they'll make the phone calls and they'll follow up and what have you, but they won't actually get out of their chair and visit the customer. And so I'm always trying to figure out through their summary of their weeks and how they divide up their time, which is it, which sort of space skill are they most resistant to,
Yeah. So for that, I thought I challenged you there, but you seem like you were ready for that one. If that salesperson, advice for a salesperson, how do you personally balance being persistent without being pushy in the sales process?
Yeah. So mostly what I explain to them is that the pushy is because usually you're doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And I try to show them different ways of doing it from a different angle so that it's a little bit more tricky in a way. And so what I mean by that is that somebody will just phone, right? And so and I mean, and all of a sudden it's like, what here, like a stalker, right? And I'm always like, if you phone, you actually have to leave a voicemail, right? Because if you don't, you do start to take on that look of a stalker, right? And so, and then if you're going to leave a voicemail, you have to do it a very specific way, right? And so I have tip in the book on how to leave a voicemail. Always, at least 20 seconds, no more than 30 seconds, right? Skip all the pleasantries and hit them with a hook. And it's, it's in the book or whatever. And then once you've done that, then you want to, get them with an email or something, follow up with an email, and say further to my voicemail, and I mentioned I'll follow up with you next week, and then your next call. And then you want to try to do things like, and this may sound strange or whatever, but figure out all the people he works with and call them too. Right. And get other people in the department. Right. And it's just act like you're prospecting. Maybe even though you're trying to, maybe that he's buying, a quantum exasperator for their new factory or whatever, and he's the main guy. But, you can call people that work around him and say, hey, I hear there might be opportunities for quantum exasperators in your building this, that's really like Bob's thing, right? Oh, I've been having trouble getting a hold of Bob. I was going to be in your building next week. Maybe could I drop off some info and, maybe get a chance to meet you or Bob or whatever. And I'm always trying different ways of, whether it's phone, email, sending them products, dropping things off, et cetera. And then talking to all the different people around them. Right. And the other thing is that this is a little tip that I often tell people is that whenever you're selling something, it could be $5K or it could be $500K or $5 million or whatever, but whatever you sell, you have to look at the product you sell or service or whatever and say, hey, it's $500K. And the business that I'm selling it to, how big are they? Like they're 5 million or 50 million or 500 million or whatever. So who in the building, like who in the company that's as big that you're selling it to, the $500 million company is signing the PO for 500K. Right. Yeah. Because in a company that's 5 million, it's the owner. There's no question. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Like 10 times, 10% of the value of the turnover of the business, probably the owner signing it. Right. But if it's a 50 million, probably the director of finance, VP of purchasing, something like that, but it varies or whatever, but you want to start way up there. And even though that it may be counterintuitive, where it's like you call the CEO of a company and you say, hey, I hear you guys are looking at quantum exasperators and, we've got the fastest one in the business. I want to see if I can get some time. He's like, what are you talking about? I don't, that's dealt with. My vice president of technology handles that. Is that Bob? No, it's Jack. And right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Nice talking to you. Let me give Jack a call. You call Jack, say, Jack, hey, I was just on the phone with the CEO. And, and he said, you guys got amazing quantum exasperators, but it's not me. It's all on Jack, right? So Jack's like, what are you talking about? I'm the vice president of technology. It's the manager of technology that, that's Bill. What are you bothering me with this shit for? Pardon the language. Sorry. What are you bothering me with this stuff for? Then you call Bill and you say, Bill, I've been on the phone all day with the CEO, the vice president, the director. They told me, hey, I got to get these exasperators into your building, as quickly as possible. And before you know it, you're at the junior test technician or something, right? You've gone down 7 layers, but at any point in time, you can go to the right layer to get the right answer that you need. And the difference is the sales guys that you say to them, like, what's going on with that sale at XYZ Corp? And you're like, oh, they sent it upstairs to the powers that be, right? And I'm like, what the hell heck does that mean, right? Yeah. And, like, who's the powers that be? Oh, I don't know, but they be all right. Like, and I'm like, yeah, and that's why you're not getting the order, because you don't know who they are. You don't know who they be. And because the guy who's getting the deal, he's talked to the powers that be, and he knows if they're signing it off, if there's money, not money, budget holdups happening next year, happening this year, going to sign off. The reason you don't know any of that is because you're just talking to the junior guy. Mm-hmm. And he's just telling you that it's with the powers that be because he's not willing to give you any information. But if you start the other way, you can then go back anytime there, to any one of those people and say, oh, I'm just checking in. I know this is going to go across your desk. Yes. Do you have any questions? Right. Yeah. Yeah. And those are people that will push you in, like when you're having trouble and want to be persistent to people. And the guy that needs to talk to you is going to be way more persistent when his boss just spoke to you and told you to call him. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Most people never think about the equipment behind the modern power grid. What do you wish the average person understood about the infrastructure that keeps everything running?
Yeah, they need to be spending a lot of money on the power grid right now. That's what they need to know. And because it's, I don't want to say hanging by a thread, but it's very old. And although there's a lot of modernity or whatever being built into it, nobody can build the products fast enough to scale the power grid fast enough to keep up with the power demands that are coming, specifically, and now even unpredictably because of the growth of the explosion of AI, right? And like just to put a point of fact to it, for instance, I believe like 3 Mile Island, which hard to believe, but they're thinking of reopening it. And I think it's Microsoft's bought 20 years of the power production before it's even opened. They bought the entire production for 20 years of power to power their data center. That's how much power is needed and how important it is to be in line to get the power. Yeah. And so what people need to know is that we need to scale our power, 100-fold just to keep up with our demands and to modernize and harden it from cyber attack, from what have you, right? And but I am extremely impressed at how much time the utilities do spend bolstering the resiliency of the thing from cyber attacks and things like that. Like, we can't bring anything into a utility until it's been fully tested and vetted for anything that could ever have any kind of a cyber effect on it or what have you. So
you mentioned the explosion of AI and data centers. I mean, that is creating an unprecedented amount of power. What's the biggest challenge utilities are facing right now that no one's talking about?
Well, like one of their biggest challenges is the whole fight against the whole cyber aspect of it, right? And how vulnerable it is to it. That's probably one of the biggest ones. But honestly, like, I've only been at it. I bought the company a year before I left my other company. I've only been working at it full time for a year, so I'm still learning, to be honest. And there's just a huge demand for them to scale the amount of power that they can deliver, and they cannot keep up. Like, they can't build transformers fast enough. Like, transformers are sold out for years and years and years. That's why, like, they say if there's any kind of like a destructive event, you're kind of pooched, because it would take 5 years to get all the transformers that you need to replace broken ones, right? You can't just go to the transformer store and buy an entire US power grid worth of transformers. It's not going to happen. And so I probably need to come back in a year or two and be on your show and answer that question better.
You run a major company, yet you still experiment with side projects like Acumen Insight and SalesMinds.ai. What role does curiosity play in your daily life?
I get up every morning, and that's kind of what I'm doing, is my little curious, investigation into all these things and trying to come up with little techniques, tips and tricks on how to do things better and faster. And those projects are kind of like sharing them with like-minded entrepreneurs and seeing if I can, while I run my day job, it's kind of like their pet projects, and seeing if, hey, maybe I'll hit a vein of, a thing of oil or whatever, right? With one of them. Right. And, but I'm learning ways of speeding up, responding to tenders and RFPs. A lot of the stuff I sell, we have to submit, 80-page requests for quotes, and I'm developing tools and AI models that help me to review the RFPs quicker, look at more of them, and respond to them faster, right? And so, that's a real world use for a sales company that makes it's a real game changer, right? Because you can only read so many documents. And it really can help a lot. So And so I'm always learning, I'm always studying the next little piece of technology, and, and whether it's, AI for that stuff, or, you mentioned at the beginning, I'm also a DJ. I'm a charity DJ though. I like to make sure that's well known. They're like, what is a charity DJ? I'm like, well, I'm actually in very high demand, but that's because my fees are quite accessible, right? And so there's a lot of nonprofits and stuff that I work with, and I DJ their events, and they're a lot of fun. And but I don't particularly need the part-time job, so I do it for the cost of gear, the cost of insurance and travel and things like that, and pass on the savings to the to the nonprofits, and I get to do what I like to do. They get a good deal, and it works well. But I'm always playing around with the latest technology with DJs and hardware gear and stuff, music stuff and stuff like that, right? So I'm very curious in that regard.
This was a lot of fun, Glenn. That's a wrap on today's episode of Talking with Donato. Huge thanks to you, Glenn, for dropping real wisdom on entrepreneurship, reinvention. We talked about what it takes to lead across completely different industries. Your journey from building companies in Canada to stepping into the power sector in the US. It's a reminder that growth isn't about staying comfortable. It's about staying curious, as you just mentioned. If we all learn something today, I think it's going to draw people back. They'll hit the like button, they'll subscribe, and then they'll be in the comments and say, hey, why don't you bring them back? So
nice.
I reserve the right. And for everyone else, definitely check out Glenn's book, Never Sit in the Lobby, along with his projects at Prog USA, Acumen Insight, and salesminds.ai. And as always, appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks again, Glenn. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Don.